Labour is using Brexit. Yes, the party that once tried to avoid talking about Brexit as if it were a contagious political disease is now not only acknowledging its existence but actively using its so-called freedoms to bulldoze right through the kind of EU environmental protections that used to be untouchable. In 2025, the headlines aren't about tariffs or trade wars anymore, they are about otters, nightingales, and chalk streams. Yeah, chalk streams, those sparkling delicate veins of English nature that now risk becoming drainage ditches in a nation that proudly voted to take back control, only to hand that control to bulldozers and developers. At the heart of the story is a new planning and infrastructure bill, which, under the banner of post Brexit flexibility, would allow developers to pay into a so called nature restoration fund while building over protected habitats that were once safeguarded under EU law. Think of it as a destroy now, restore later, maybe, scheme, where protections enshrined in the EU Habitats Directive are swapped for vague promises and developer-friendly shortcuts, all wrapped in the language of progress and growth with a generous side of habitat destruction. And this isn't some fringe proposal buried deep in the policy weeds. It's a flagship bill backed by a Labour government that many voters believe would restore sanity, decency, and accountability after years of Conservative chaos. Clive Lewis, the Labour MP for Norwich South, is sounding the alarm from within his own party, warning that the public doesn't yet realise that Brexit is being weaponized to dismantle hard-won environmental laws quietly and efficiently under the radar of most voters who never expected Labour to behave this way. He's voting against the bill, calling it a turbocharged assault on the environment, a betrayal of principles that were supposed to separate Labour from the party it just replaced in government. And he is not wrong. This bill targets more than 5,000 precious ecological sites across the UK, areas like the New Forest, the Peak District moors, the Forest of Bowland, and rivers like the Itchen and the Wensum, all of them labelled as jewels in the crown of Britain's natural heritage, and all of them now sitting on a planning board hit list dressed up in legislative language. Under the old EU system, protections for these habitats were enshrined in law with detailed impact assessments, checks, balances, and a web of regulations that, while sometimes frustrating to ministers and builders, actually did what they were supposed to do: protect nature from destruction. But those rules came from Brussels, and post-Brexit Britain is in no mood for reminders of its former legal obligations, even if those obligations protected the last hazel dormice and rare butterflies fluttering over an ancient meadow that developers now see as prime real estate. And now Labour is taking full advantage of that legal vacuum, pushing ahead with policies that not even the Conservatives dared attempt in such open fashion. Yes, the same Labour that opposed the retained EU Law Act when it was rammed through by Boris Johnson's government is now using the legal tools it provides to gut environmental regulations that were considered sacrosanct for decades. According to the Office for Environmental Protection, the watchdog created precisely to replace EU oversight, this bill represents a regression in environmental standards, a rollback of protections that leaves vital ecosystems exposed to unchecked development. And this isn't just a policy choice, it's a political gamble. Because Labour is assuming that voters, especially those in the red wall constituencies it clawed back from the Conservatives, either won't notice or won't care that their chalk streams, ancient woodlands, and local wildlife havens are being concreted over in the name of efficiency and economic growth. But other parties are starting to notice. The Liberal Democrats, always keen to pick up the pieces of broken promises, are vowing to defend waterways and habitats, accusing the government of offering vague benefits in some distant future while destroying nature in the present. The Green Party's Zach Polanski went even further, accusing Labour of copying the worst instincts of Reform UK, selling off nature to the highest bidder, while pretending that a spreadsheet and a restoration fund will somehow compensate for the disappearance of a Nightingale song. He called it nature destroying, and frankly, he's not exaggerating. Because what this bill represents is not just a shift in planning policy. It's a symbolic moment in Britain's post-Brexit journey, a signal that the environmental protections once guaranteed by EU law are no longer politically untouchable, not even by the so-called party of the progressive centre-left. And in case anyone still thinks this is about balance or compromise, let's be clear, we are not talking about minor adjustments to zoning laws or some harmless flexibility for brownfield development. We are talking about allowing developers to build on sites that were once classified as SSSIs, sites of special scientific interest, and special protection areas, homes to rare species that don't vote and don't donate to campaign funds. We're talking about reducing environmental stewardship to an optional payment into a fund, a kind of green indulgence that allows the destruction of habitats in exchange for a vague promise to plant some trees somewhere else later. And we're talking about a government, Labour's government, that has chosen deliberately to use the very freedoms of Brexit in order to weaken rather than strengthen environmental protection. It's a choice, not a necessity. And that's what makes it so revealing, because for all the talk about making Brexit work, what we are seeing is a kind of quiet technocratic exploitation of Brexit's legal void to do things no government dared attempt before. And for a party that promised accountability and transparency, there's something profoundly cynical about the way this bill is being pushed through, almost daring voters not to notice. But people are noticing. From wildlife charities like the Wildlife Trusts to community groups and local activists opposition is mounting. And the question Labour now faces isn't just whether it can pass the bill, but whether it can defend what this bill says about its values. Because Brexit gave the UK the freedom to go it alone, and now Labour is showing us exactly where they are choosing to go. Not towards stronger protections or higher standards, not toward leading Europe on environmental leadership, but toward a deregulated future where nature has a price tag, and green spaces are just another line item in a spreadsheet. Labour is using Brexit, and in doing so, they may just be redefining what post-Brexit Britain really stands for. Not sovereignty, not sustainability, but speed, development and silence, where once there was the sound of birdsong. And if you want to see another video, it's right here in the end screen.